Hey everyone, Brandon here from TruckSafe Consulting. Roadside inspections can be nerve-wracking for even the most seasoned drivers. Violations stemming from those inspections can follow drivers throughout their careers, making it difficult for them to find work. And violations also negatively impact motor carrier safety scores, which can lead to enforcement actions such as an audit. Fortunately, some of the most common violations discovered during roadside inspections are very simple to fix and avoid in the first place. In this video, we'll take a look at 5 of the most common driver-related violations and the steps that drivers and carriers can take to prevent them from occurring. So stay tuned, and if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button below so you can stay up to date on all of our DOT-related content. So first up on our list of 5 common roadside violations is false report of duty status, which comes in as the 3rd most common driver-related violation behind only speeding and failing to obey traffic signals. False reports of duty status, also called false logs, can be a serious problem because they can be used for nefarious purposes such as concealing hours of service violations. The whole point of the hours of service regulations is to keep fatigued drivers off the roadways and prevent fatigue-related accidents. So the falsification of logs, which are the means by which commercial drivers keep track of their duty status, is an in-run around the substantive hours of service rules. For this reason, you can understand why the DOT takes log falsification so seriously. In fact, log falsification is a big reason why we now have electronic logging devices, which are designed to cut down on false logs by automatically recording when the vehicle is in motion. Now, even with ELDs, false logs are still a problem in the industry, both for drivers who remain on paper logs and also those on ELDs. Although the DOT doesn't really do so, I like to make a distinction between deliberately falsified logs and those that are falsified due to a driver's misunderstanding of the hours of service rules. Now, in my experience, it's this latter category of log falsifications that tend to be more prevalent. And I'll go one step further to say that the majority of log falsifications we see during roadside inspections these days are due to a driver's misuse of the personal conveyance status. Now, we've addressed the prickly subject of personal conveyance status in another video, so we won't get into the weeds here. Suffice it to say, drivers and carriers should take care to read through and understand the FMCSA's guidance on that topic and ensure they are not using personal conveyance status improperly. Doing so will lead to false log violations, which weigh heavily on the drivers' and carriers' safety scores. Another common mistake that leads to log falsifications include things like logging fueling time as off-duty rather than on-duty not driving. In short, drivers need to ensure they fully understand the hours of service rules, particularly things like the duty status and personal conveyance, so they don't inadvertently end up with false log violations. To this end, be sure to check out our comprehensive online hours of service training course over at trucksafeacademy.com. And drivers certainly should not be attempting to conceal hours of service violations by deliberately falsifying their logs. This will inevitably come back to bite them, typically in the form of violations stemming from roadside inspections. But you should also be aware that falsifying logs can lead to criminal penalties. For carriers, we recommend you have a detailed personal conveyance policy in place, making clear when drivers can and cannot log their driving time as personal conveyance. If you need assistance drafting such a policy, be sure you get in contact with us. Also, carriers should be periodically auditing their driver records of duty status and taking appropriate remedial measures against drivers who falsify their logs. Next up on our list of 5 common roadside violations is operating a commercial motor vehicle without a CDL when one is required. This is routinely on the list of top 5 driver-related violations discovered by law enforcement during roadside inspections. Now, these often occur because drivers and/or their carriers either aren't familiar with the thresholds that require a CDL or are not properly tracking the weights of their vehicles. Now, we've taken a deep dive into this topic in some articles on our website, but generally speaking, commercial drivers who operate the following types of vehicles in interstate or intrastate commerce are required to hold a CDL. First up, a vehicle having a gross vehicle weight rating or gross vehicle weight of 26,001 pounds or more. Next up, a combination of vehicles having a gross combination weight rating or gross combination weight of 26,001 pounds or more, inclusive of a towed unit with a GVWR or GVW of more than 10,000 pounds. Next up, a vehicle designed to transport 16 or more passengers, including the driver. And then lastly, a vehicle of any size used to transport placardable quantities of hazmat. Now, drivers and carriers need to understand these weight and commodity thresholds and ensure drivers aren't jumping in vehicles that require a CDL when they don't hold one. Also, it's a fairly common occurrence for a driver to add a heavy trailer to a power unit that by itself would not require a CDL. However, the addition of that trailer pushes the combination above the 26,001 pound threshold and therefore requires a CDL. So the takeaway here is that carriers and drivers need to be careful with their vehicle weights and understand that exceeding the 26,001 pound threshold will require a CDL. Lastly, it's important to remember that states will take action to downgrade a CDL holder's license to a standard operator's license in certain situations, such as failing to renew a medical card, failing to pay child support, and failing to appear for a court date. In these cases, the state will typically send notice to the driver, but the driver may not always receive that notice. This results in the driver continuing to operate a CDL-sized vehicle with a license that has been downgraded, and this inevitably leads to violations. For this reason, drivers and carriers need to keep close track of license status, and carriers should consider enrolling in a continuous license monitoring service to receive automatic notifications when and if a driver's license is downgraded. Next up on our list here are ELD form and manner violations. Some of the most frustrating violations that stem from roadside inspections are those that are so simple to fix. That's the case with these form and manner violations. These are technical violations that arise from a driver's failure to complete all of the required fields on their record of duty status, whether it's paper or electronic. Most often, form and manner violations stem from the driver's failure to input the trailer and/or the shipping details on the log, both of which are required. Section 395.8D of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations details exactly what information must appear on every log. These include the date, the total miles driving today, truck or tractor and trailer number, the name of the carrier, the driver's signature/certification, the 24-hour period starting time, for example, midnight, 9 a.m., noon, 3 p.m., the main office address, remarks, the name of any co-driver, the total hours, and the shipping document number or name of the shipper in the commodity. Failing to include any one of these required fields will result in a form and manner violation. Drivers should take care to review their logs each day to ensure they are complete and accurate. They should also be sure to certify each day's log. And for their part, carriers should be auditing driver logs to ensure drivers are completing them each day. Next up on our list of 5 common roadside violations are no blank logs in the truck. Now, the ELD mandate originally went into effect in 2016. Prior to that time, drivers were required to keep track of their duty status each day on paper logs. Now that the ELD mandate is in effect, most drivers are required to track their duty status using ELDs that are integrally synchronized with their vehicle's engine. As with all technology, ELDs are susceptible to occasional outages and malfunctions. Now, with that in mind, the FMCSA wanted to have a backup plan in place for drivers in the event their ELD device quit working on them. Specifically, the regulations require drivers to have a blank supply of paper logs in their vehicles at all times. And more specifically, they must have at least 8 days worth of paper logs with them to use in the event their ELD device malfunctions. Why 8 days? Well, 8 days is the maximum time frame that drivers can operate without an ELD in the event of a malfunction. After the 8th day, the device must be fixed or replaced according to the rules. So in sum, drivers need to make sure they have at least 8 days worth of blank logs with them at all times and can present them to law enforcement during a roadside inspection upon demand. So last up on our list, and another exceedingly common ELD-related violation that drivers and carriers encounter during roadside inspections is missing ELD instructions and/or transfer manuals. Fortunately, this is another violation that is really easy to correct and to avoid. Now, the ELD regulation says that drivers must have a copy of their ELD instruction manual as well as instructions on how to use their device to electronically transfer logs to law enforcement with them in the cab of their vehicle. These instruction sheets can be printed or in electronic form. In fact, many ELD providers build electronic versions of these manuals into their devices, which drivers can typically access on the devices themselves. More and more officers will ask drivers to present these manuals as a matter of course during a roadside inspection. And if drivers can't find them or access them on their device, it will inevitably lead to violations. To avoid this, drivers should either have a printed copy of their manuals in a place that's easily accessible to them during an inspection, or should know how to access the electronic versions of those manuals if they're available on their ELDs. So wrapping up here, many of the most commonly discovered driver-related violations are simple to correct and avoid. Carriers should spend time with their drivers to discuss these violations and steps to take to avoid them, and drivers should take care to understand and internalize these requirements. For more detailed information on these types of rules and others, make sure you check out our comprehensive online regulatory courses over at trucksafeacademy.com. And if you need specific help that's tailored to your operations, feel free to get in touch with us on our website at trucksafeconsulting.com. Lastly, make sure you follow us on social media as we regularly post free content for drivers and safety managers across our various platforms. Thanks for watching.